So, will the police really prosecute senior Tories and civil servants, and even royals? Several survivors allege sexual abuse took place in Buckingham Palace itself in the run-up to the general election. Well, to discuss that and other things, we hear now from abuse survivor Sam Hill. Hi, Sam, and welcome.
Hi there. Hi, Tony.
Welcome to the Politics Show.
Yes, I've experienced power abuse from the institutions, and I wrote a book about it 6 years ago. It's called An Oath to Hell. It's available on Amazon. My experience is that it's status abuse, really, and the abusers know full well that it previously could play the institutions. It's generally in Britain, I think, is about keeping up appearances, and very often an abuser will have more inclination and desire to wish to do that. And obviously a survivor may be, off the rails and suffering emotionally. So they use that advantage, and it is used by the state as well.
OK, so you say there's status abuse. That's not a term I'm familiar with. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Well, there's a lot of anti-victim prejudice. When you try and recover from abuse, firstly you have to deal with the fallout in your own family. And if that's successful, if you're nurtured, you can hope to progress. But then if you're not, if you're in an institution, they tend to have an attitude whereby they make their money and they earn the livings from keeping people who have been, what could be described as damaged in submission. And of course there are some wonderful people working within the institutions, but it can be said that it's very difficult within an institution, especially if you've encountered an abuser within an institution, to actually get it out. You imagine being a whistleblower with a job. You try doing that as a child or someone within an institution and see what happens. It's not pleasant.
OK, give us just a brief idea, just a couple of minutes of explain what happened to you and what age did it start? Well,
I mean, I was 11 or so when I was started becoming groomed. My grandparents moved to a wealthy neighbourhood, and I got to know some of the local children there. And one of them took his dog for a walk, and his neighbour was somebody I knew through a friend at school. I was asked to be a helper at a children's party, and I experienced organised abuse at these parties. I didn't actually know what it was then, but as time has gone on, I've known. Luckily, there were only 2 occasions I'd encountered this. But I was unable to take it forward because of it being swept under the carpet by family and various other means of silencing.
Well, that's pretty horrible to hear it being swept under the carpet by your family. Horrible stuff. But give us an idea of what was actually, when you're saying this, without going into too much detail, what sort of abuse are we talking about?
Well, there were men exposing themselves at the top of the stairs, for a start. We were told to go and knock on the door and open it, several of us. That kind of scale. I don't really want to go into too much detail, but that's the kind of scale it was. And there were children at one of the parties who none of us knew, and they came down half-dressed, and they were not talking. They were crawling around on the floor. We were told we'd be taken to someone else's house, but luckily another person at the party prevented that from happening. There were children's parties. And one of the people I got to know a few years through being controlled by him after this, that they asked, do you want us to help run your children's party? But the thing is, they had powerful friends. They had friends who were GPs in the neighbourhood. And believe me, with the amount of information sharing and the amount of will to keep things quiet, it's not hard to do when you're dealing with powerful people, and it's very difficult to get your voice heard.
Well, I know you mentioned, and I had a chat on the phone to you yesterday about actually connections with Eton, because this is one of the real problems, isn't it? That a lot of the most powerful people in the country actually go through that school.
Yes, I know. I mean, it was the same era as one of the Havers brothers was there. That the 2 brothers I knew were there. I can't imagine what went on to make them turn that way. I don't know. I can't imagine whether it's there was an element of we are so superior, nothing matters, that I experienced when I was in contact with these 2. We were supposed to be grateful, that they were showing interest in us, that kind of thing. It was bizarre.
Is it, as simple as the idea of, obviously all young children want to go to a children's party, and that was actually then used as a kind of vector for abuse to go on?
Yes, it was. It's horrific. And as I say, luckily, there are only 2 occasions where I was exposed to this, but yes.
I mean, surely any parents involved would twig that something dodgy was going on. I mean, what happened within your own family, for example?
Well, I didn't exactly discuss it. I didn't even have the language to really know exactly what was happening. I had flashbacks of what happened for many years. We were taken out of the party and prevented from being taken to another house. And it's difficult to know. You're kind of almost silenced by your own voice, by your own sort of lack of ability to describe it, especially at that age.
And so did a much older man then start a relationship of some sort with you?
Yeah, that's the way they can manage it, because then they have a hold on you and can sort of control your emotions a bit better.
But you were very young. I mean, how much older was he?
Yes, 19 years older.
He's about 30, something like that. Anyway, surely your parents would have twigged something was wrong there.
Yes, I don't know. I do remember conversations about it vaguely. You overhear conversations as a kid, because, I mean, I wasn't really included on them. They were saying, well, maybe it's better to let her get on with it and heal rather than, digging it up, making therapy and going to court and stuff. I don't know whether it was their own modesty and wanting to keep up appearances, or if it was for my own good, or what misguided them, really, or whether they realised the people involved were powerful. My family were kind of a bit modest and quite young. They didn't really like talking about things very much. They were Masons as well, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it.
Well, that's interesting, yeah, because Freemasonry, I mean, I've certainly come across that quite a lot as being one of the, children of Freemasons being involved. So you're saying your parents were Freemasons, or their friends?
That was another thing I wasn't supposed to talk about.
Oh, really? Freemasonry?
Not supposed to tell people that they were Masons, no.
So, I mean, do you think that there is some sort of Masonic connection? Because it's a secret society,
I used to sit opposite head of the police at Christmas dinners on several occasions, yeah. But, I mean, I don't know how far it went, because every time I tried to contact the police, the record of my interviews and investigations, they were not recorded.
So you have had a go at going through the official route, going to the police, telling them that abuse has been going on. What happened? Nothing.
Well, I mean, I had a breakdown at 19. It was all very convenient for my family, and, the generic diagnosis of how you present in psychiatry is kind of held over you pretty much forever. So,
I mean, have you had?
At 19.
I just wondered if you'd found that there were some professionals that were actually able to help and help you through it.
No, I really didn't. I tried. I couldn't find it. But then it was always a struggle, trying to find somewhere to live, because I left home pretty much at 16. I went back occasionally in my teens, but I left home and lived in Denmark at 16, and then I struggled to try and find myself somewhere to live and just survive. It was really difficult, because that's another reason why abusers know they can get away with it. You spend a lot of time sometimes just recovering. I didn't get into drugs or do anything or actually homeless or do anything too much, but it was just a struggle to survive. And they've got that advantage over you, because it takes a few years to get back on your feet, really, if you're unlucky. Yeah,
so you had to struggle with virtually no money. I mean, how did you earn a living, for example?
Concentration wasn't very good for a while, and then I started having flashbacks. But, I mean, I managed to hold down jobs occasionally, part-time jobs, and struggled my way through life, really. I can't really explain it now, but...
Sam, what were your thoughts when a couple of years ago the whole Jimmy Savile scandal broke?
That was a revelation. That was for years thinking it was me and my limited group of friends who had also been victimised by the state. I'd had friends who'd been victims of survivors of child sex abuse, and they'd been pushed into the mental health system by, at the point of having a fight with their father, for instance, who was an abuser, and then doctors called. So I'd seen direct, repercussions of child sex abuse going on around me, and the way the state handled it, and thought that was disgusting. But to realise it had gone on a large scale, it really opened my eyes. It was dreadful to say, but it was almost a relief. You think, my God, I'm not alone. I can speak. People won't think I'm mad. That's the danger. You worry that people are going to think you're crazy.
Well, I mean, if the BBC Newsnight editor Peter Rippon had his way, no one would have known about it. I wonder what you think of the fallout from that, which includes this inquiry which was begun back last summer by Theresa May into the systematic abuse by the state.
Yes, I think society's got to adjust, and I think it's got to take time. It can't snap into understanding what's been going on straight away. These are like hard entrenched sort of attitudes between them and us, really. Those who have power and those who sort of dare to criticise it. But I think it's changing, and I think I haven't given up on the government inquiry. I'm quite saddened that they think that survivors shouldn't be on the panel because they're not going to be objective enough, and they shouldn't choose the chair because they may be too emotional. I've heard all these attitudes, in the news, but I haven't given up on it as a concept. I think it could something has got to happen. We've just got to start somewhere.
The only trouble is, of course, we've got a general election in the offing, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's going to take a lot of the emphasis away, isn't it, from doing anything. But I don't think the survivors are going to let people forget, and I don't think the public is going to forget now. So all we can hope is that this is going to generate some movement.
I just wonder, I mean, if you've got solace from chatting with other survivors from different parts of the country, maybe even from quite near to where you grew up, I suppose, to share the burden a bit.
Yes, I have. I have done. Online recently and with friends. So unfortunately, one of my friends died. He was a victim of child abuse. He was treated very badly by the state. He was turned into public enemy number one, but he was a lovely guy to the people who knew him. He had a difficult life. I've shared it with people. I've got some very strong friendships, but the ones I made online recently have been very interesting. Yeah, Teresa Cooper, who was, again, medicated and abused in an institution. She's been a great support to me. She's given me legal advice and help, all sorts of help.
So this is another hideous aspect to all of this, is that sometimes the victims of child sexual abuse over the years have been actually treated as sort of patients and then been told, well, actually, you're going to need some kind of treatment. So what happened to you?
Well, yeah, I was given huge amounts of medication, the stuff that they give to Soviet prisoners. Back in '89, when I had my breakdown, I was 19, I was given huge amounts of stelazine. And stelazine, as I said, is used for political dissidents. It knocks you out, it makes you soulless, basically. It's one of the ones that Teresa Cooper was given as a 14-year-old, which is highly illicit. But, nasty stuff. Put on 3 stone in weight in 6 months. You stop thinking, debilitates you.
That was some sort of treatment program. Did they put it across like that?
They offer people. It was in. It's got a bad reputation. This place that I was at. They've shut them all down now, haven't they? But yeah.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about this? Going back to the child sexual abuse inquiry, what are your thoughts about what would make that work and what would not? Because as you've just now said, there are problems with actually getting survivors onto the panel, and it seems pretty clear that you're going to have at least 1 or 2 survivors there in order for it to have credibility.
Yes, I know, but then I've always sort of tried to wonder whether there's going to be dispute about which survivors and whether they're fully representative. I think it's wrong that they don't have any, but on the other hand, we just have to, I think, calm ourselves and see something is happening. I think it's the rage, it's the way that we've all been treated in the past. We've been told to go away, we've been told to be quiet, and we can see this all being done, by the state again. But I think in some ways, we really ought to try and take a deep breath and see that there will be progress, and that we'll just keep calm about whatever they do. And when something's happening, if it's not done properly, then we can start getting angry and upset.
Now, tell us a little bit about your life now, because as a survivor, hopefully, anyway, you've managed to pull your life around to become to lead a relatively normal, happy life. Yeah, I think this is it, you see. I think this is why they call us survivors. I think the lucky ones who do survive, we stand a good chance of becoming stronger and wiser, especially now with these things being in the open in the press. I think that's going to help a lot of people, hopefully. Yeah, I've got my life back together, and it can be done. And as someone that's been through all this, what advice have you got for people out there who maybe think that maybe somebody that they know may have been abused, or what are the warning signs?
I think if somebody's quiet, I was very quiet and well-disciplined, it can happen in many different ways. I think some people can become outrageously kind of extrovert, and some people can be very quiet. I was very quiet. I think if you can't communicate with them clearly, you've got to try and... I think I was obviously not communicating clearly, even my friends would have known. But they wouldn't have known why. I think if you can't get a good channel of communication with someone, then you might realise something might not be right.
Finally, Sam, this Freemason connection that you brought up, I mean, it's something that we've discussed on this show many times, all sorts of corruption, because basically within the Masonic lodges, they swear oaths, Freemasons, that means that they will protect the secrets of Freemasonry and their fellow Freemasons. And I don't personally think that these people are fit for public office since they've sworn those oaths, actually, which shut the public out. So what have you learnt over the years about, about the possible connections of Freemasonry to this kind of abuse?
I'm not so sure. I suppose there are a lot of powerful people who are connected, and with a common cause, they're going to make things happen. They're going to pull strings. I've seen enough strings pulled within social services, mental health, to know that strings get pulled by the authorities and institutions anyway. Whether you can say solely the Masons, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of secrets within the Masons.
But I suppose my question is more, how do you break that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. How do you break it? I think I can't answer that one. It's horrible. I don't like secret societies at all. Well, I don't know. How can you break it?
I suppose
if you're not getting justice repeatedly, try and expose it, I suppose.
Well, I suppose, there may be also the courtroom type of situation which could force people to expose that they have been colluding in the cover-up of child abuse. That's the only way I can think of.
Yeah, there's got to be some kind of change in the law, hasn't there? I mean, mandatory reporting, that would be a good one. If people could disclose whistleblowers and sort of have protection for them. But I don't know how you'd ever get people to expose that they're Freemasons, would they? Is that what you meant?
Well, I've got a little book, so we may be able to do a bit of that. And I think that's actually quite important because it's the provincial yearbooks for the various Masonic areas, provinces they have, but rather similar to the ordinary counties, and each one has its own yearbook, which has got them all listed in there. So, some use for that. Anyway, how do people follow your work online then, Sam?
Well, I'm Sam Hill on Twitter, and I'm Sam Hill 1970 on YouTube. I've got several videos up there. And I'm free to talk to people if they're interested.
Okay, Sam, thanks ever so much for joining us on the Politics Show. Now, Old Labour Oxford economist Martin Summers, this is quite a surprise to me, actually, tonight, genuinely, that Freemasonry is involved here too. I was chatting to somebody who's in contact with an abuse victim as well, whose parents were Freemasons, and that person was one of the people who's alleged to have been abused at Buckingham Palace. But ultimately, this is not going to come out, is it, in the run-up to a general election, because so many senior Conservative figures are alleged to be involved here?
Well, look, you've got to be careful about this. If people are going to be accused of very, very serious crimes, you can't rush it or... it's obviously been delayed, but this is going to run and run. It's not just about a general election, and it's not just about the Tory party. It's about the abuse of power, full stop. And Freemasonry may be involved, but what we're really interested in here, what I think is the key thing that people need to grasp, is that elite paedophilia is linked to political manipulation. That's the real thing. I mean, I heard earlier on the news that the inquiry is going to be widened now to include Scotland and Northern Ireland so that the Kincora Boys' Home can be included in the inquiry. And the allegations are at the Kincora Boys' Home, as pointed out in Ken Livingstone's maiden speech in the House of Commons in the 1990s, I think, it was being used by MI5 as a honey trap. So they were using it to blackmail mainly loyalist paramilitaries, although suggestion has now been made that other politicians were blackmailed by having sex with underage boys at the children's home and then blackmailed. And there is what you might call people using their position of power to abuse others, like the teacher that was being grilled in the news item, the Sky News earlier. But the thing that really people need to get their heads around is that the use of paedophilia as a political tool is at the heart of all of this. And
so this goes right to the top. I mean, we were talking to Stuart Siveray, weren't we, last summer about this. He's the senator from Jersey, and he was saying that they've appealed countless times to the royal family, who actually make the key appointments in the Channel Islands, that these people have got to go because they've been covering up systematic child abuse on Jersey. The royal family refused to do anything.
Well, the point is that what you've got, if it's intelligence agencies behind all of this, they will want to get people dirtied up, whether they're in the royal family, the Freemasons or whatever. It's the political goals behind it all which people need to get their head around. And I'm afraid that we have forces at work in our society, which the Queen said, of which we know nothing, but I think we know pretty much what goes on. They have been involved in using child sex as a political means of blackmail, and they've also been engaged in orchestrating terrorist attacks. These are the two main things at which the intelligence services stand accused, although they will deny it blind, but then it's their job to deny things blind as they would see it.
Getting bigger by being better. The #1 choice for Bristol. This is BCFM 93.2.